You're watching Moments with Jill Walker. Today I'm talking about healing, part 2. I'm out at my backyard, rather on the edge of my neighbor's yard, and you're hearing the traffic of the I-57 interstate, so I do apologize about that. But I still wanted to use this water to tell a story that's in the Bible, recorded in 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 27. It's the story of Naaman. Naaman was the captain of a Syrian army. He was a very important man, and he came down with something very terrible. It's called leprosy. We don't hear that much about it today, but it's spots on people's skin that breaks out, and it actually can eat away at their skin and even kill them. It's a terrible plague for someone to have. And so even though this captain of Syria seemed like he had everything going for him, he was an important man. He had worked his way up, I suppose, to be the captain of that army of Syria. Sure, he was fighting the enemy. Actually, it was Israel. They captured a little maid. The Bible doesn't give her name. They just call her Little Maid. But when they captured her, little did they realize, and little did she realize, what a blessing that would be for both of them. And so the little maid noticed that the captain of Syria, who captured her, had leprosy, and he was just so heartsick about it. But she had faith in the Almighty God. And even as just a little maid, she told him about God. And she told him about a man named Elisha. And so Naaman goes to his Syrian king, and he asks the king to write a letter to the king of Israel. When the king of Israel reads the letter, he gets really kind of irate. Who am I to heal? Who am I to make alive again? Who am I to do a miracle like this? He thought it was possibly even a trick because they were the enemy. Why would they be asking him to help? And so Elisha heard about it, and Elisha called for Naaman. This is an interesting story because some of you watching today, since we're on the subject of healing, you could have so many things going for you, except it may not be leprosy, but it's something that's bothering your body, and you need a healing. Jesus is the healer. He can use doctors, he can use medicine, but Jesus is the great physician. I want to say something right now. Sometimes I get grieved and bothered when I see people, or have seen them over the years on TV, and they present themselves as if they have some gift of healing. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. He just uses us as tools in his hands. Who are we to boast about what gift we would have? It's something so sacred and so private when God does use us. Others may say it, but may it never be said out of our own lips that we have certain gifts in healing or miracles or such like, to even come close to looking like we're boasting about it, because Jesus is really the healer, and he's the one that will choose to use someone, if he so desires, to pray for another person. And when they get healed, it's really Jesus moving on that situation. So Naaman hears about Elisha, and he meets Elisha. Now this is real important. And so Naaman was just assuming that Elisha would come out, recognize what an important man Naaman was, after all, and he would lay hands on him. This is what's recorded now in 2 Kings 5, 1 through 14. But it didn't work that way. And sometimes it doesn't work the way we imagine in our head, how God is going to answer prayer, whether it's regarding a healing or not. God is God, and he's going to use his way and his method to get the job done, because ultimately it's always for his glory. If we think we have it figured out, God just might take a turn just to show us he's God. That's right. And so when Naaman found out that Elisha wasn't going to pray for him, but instead he said, go to the muddy River Jordan. Well, he didn't call it muddy, but Naaman knew it was muddy. Now, this is just a pond in my backyard. Obviously, it's not the muddy River Jordan, but I will tell you this. Many years ago, I thought about doing some baptismal services in that pond. And I talked to an individual who had something to do with the subdivision when it was started. And this person said, you wouldn't want to use this pond to do baptismal. It's way too dirty, way too muddy. Anyway, it has some snapping turtles. That's dangerous, isn't it? So you can probably tell right down here, I can see it, but I don't know if you can see it that well, but I literally see green muck and all that kind of stuff in the pond. So imagine it being even dirtier than this. And he's a captain of Syria. And so when Elisha said, just go and wash 7 times in that river, he didn't want to do it. But guess what? His servants, Naaman's servants, talked him into it. Look, he didn't ask you to do a hard thing. All he asked you to do is dip 7 times. That's not a hard thing. Why don't you go and do it? You see, sometimes God has to humble us before he answers our prayers. That's the truth. Sometimes we have to be humbled, and sometimes we have to yield to God's method and not our own. We don't tell God. God tells us. And so what happened was he did obey. You see, here's the main points in this. He obeyed, he was humbled, and then he received and gave thanks to God. In that order. He obeyed, he was humble, and he gave thanks to God. So he dipped himself 7 times in the muddy Jordan River, and when he came up out of the water the 7th time, guess what? He was completely healed, and his skin was just as fresh as a baby's skin. When God heals, he really heals. Naaman learned a lesson after that. I believe he became a believer in Almighty God. I really believe that. And that's one side effect of what healing does. It helps those around to realize there is a God on the throne. If you need a healing today, don't give up. Remember Matthew 19:26. With God, all things are possible. You've been watching Moments with Jill Walker. God bless you today.